Okay, and we can actually get started with the first fundamentals for Startups Fridays. Let me introduce you to our first speaker, Haresh Ved. He will be talking about trends in IoT and cloud technologies. Haresh is the managing general partner at Kronos Ventures, an early stage investment firm he founded in 2000. Prior to founding Kronos, he spent more than a decade holding key development and leadership roles at Microsoft, working on pen-centric computing and mobility technologies and products including Windows for pen computing, Windows CE, handheld pocket PCs, and tablet PCs. He also played a key role early on in developing tools and strategies to take Microsoft products to international markets. Haresh is also the founder of Thai Angel Group Seattle, an angel investment group that promotes collaboration between angel groups across all Thai chapters globally. He is also a board member of Thai Seattle. He's an active angel investor. Haresh brings 30 plus years of experience from the corporate and startup world. He enjoys working with entrepreneurs in advisory roles and helps them incubate and develop companies from ideas to implementations. Haresh has a passion for big data analytics, machine learning, mobility, education, and e-learning, and healthcare solutions. In his spare time, he loves to travel and build lifelong memories with his wife and 2 kids. So, and now I present to you Haresh Ved.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Appreciate that. If I can get a clicker for the slides, that might help. Okay. So this is just a little cheat sheet in case you have difficult questions for me. Just one update in the areas of interest. It was quite an elaborate introduction. The world is now going towards big data, IoT, and cloud. So these are the focus areas of late in the past couple of years that we focused on in our investments. All right. So focus areas. So where are most of the investments? I thought I'd give you an overview of what the more interesting areas are, where investments are happening, and we'll take a dive into technologies, talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into specific use cases of some of the companies we are involved with to give you a clear idea of how people are investing, where people are investing, what kind of technologies they are developing, what kind of solutions they are developing, and the extent of these technologies and solutions, about how startups versus corporations are working to solve this problem. So, as we all know, this is one of the areas where there's huge amounts of investments happening. There are lots of big numbers floating around on the web. You can go and check. But if we were to take the minimum, the number, it's about $200 billion of investments in IoT involved projects today, which are projected to be more than $500 billion by 21. And this number is as high as almost $1 trillion in terms of projections. So that gives you an idea. So what are the key areas? In my mind, the first thing I think most of the innovation and investments are happening in automation of any and every kind in all kinds of industries, businesses, manufacturing, etc. So, if you can imagine building a car, for instance, Toyota has one of the best implementations of automation of manufacturing cars. From what I understand, they have perfected it so well that they can push out a car every hour. So that's the kind of automation. The automation in terms of manufacturing, foundries, factories, that pretty much covers everything. Will be automation in the future. It'll be kind of surprising. Autonomous systems. What are autonomous systems? As you can imagine, autonomous vehicles which will drive by themselves, autonomous systems which will kind of work on their own. To give you an example, especially in China, they have systems that will flip burgers for you. You just place the order, and the in the system, the robots actually take care of the whole process, and they'll create the perfect burger, for the right time, the right texture every single time. Like people, if they have a fight with their spouses or girlfriends, God help you with the taste of the burger. But so these are the kind of systems that are becoming more predominant. Intelligent and collaborative applications. These are also very interesting, Gone are those days of some simple applications which might still work, but these will be applications which will trigger any action, will further trigger more actions and trigger applications to do work for us. And I think it'll be more than just one application. There'll be multiple applications working together to provide these kind of solutions. A simple example here could be photographs that we take. Today our cameras, or in fact phones, automatically update photographs to the cloud or wherever the storage is. So what is the intuitive next step that we would do? We'd like to classify, categorize these photographs. Then we would want to create albums. So today what happens is, as soon as you click the button, the photograph gets uploaded, it triggers another action which will automatically go and classify your photographs, and automatically which will trigger another step, which will be creating albums on their own. So this is already happening in the world. Personal, we are all very worried about our health. We are very health conscious nowadays. So all kind of applications, wellness, health related, etc. So that's one of the categories where there are very many investments. Smaller players also have a chance to play in that because the costs are not as high, as many other investments are not as high. And then last but not the least, the digital homes. We all know Alexa, Google Home, they've taken over our lives, right? The joke I make is, we had Big Brother looking at us. Now it's Alexa listening to us all the time. So that's what is another area of big investment that are very important and people are pursuing to create these solutions. If you think about it, IoT and Edge, they are not really technologies. It's a combination of technologies that work together in unison. But I still have listed them because they are super important. Everything revolves around that. This is another area that gardeners and corporations and enterprises have realized how important it is. People have reservations about security and solutions to help get to the cloud and manage the cloud and all that. There'll be a use case that I'll talk about there as well. And then it's all about AI and deep learning, which has been around for decades. It used to be called neural networks and all. This has a new name now. But the advent of compute power, storage, the costs that have gone down, really makes it a commonplace application of AI and deep learning. I can give you examples where once upon a time I used to work way back in, not trying to date myself here, but in about 88, where we had these big computers and 8-inch floppy drives, and I was working on this project where we were trying to analyze abnormal heartbeats. And it was just a small data set, about 10,000 records. But the way it worked was I used to insert the operating system disk, and then I would insert the application disk, and then I would insert the data disk, and I would launch the application, and I would come the next morning, and then it was probably still chugging along. Today, that can possibly happen in nanoseconds or milliseconds, or even a second, if not milliseconds. So that's the area where we'll see a lot of, it's already popular. There are systems now, AI systems, platforms, in fact, that help small companies or even enterprise to build their own machine learning and AI models and algorithms, which is pretty interesting. Writing code, developing code. I'm actually associated with a company called Dimensional Mechanics, which provides this. Makes it so simple. You have a data set, And they've created a new language that is very simple, domain-specific language, which reduces the size of code from hundreds of thousands of lines of code to maybe a couple dozen lines of code to get it going. Machine learning, yes, it's all about learning as well from the data. We all know this. Kid learns faster and smarter than machines, but we someday will get there. That's a super important area. And then the edge. This is another area where there's a lot of investments happening, where there we'll see evolution of technology, where we are aggregating data, what happens to the data at that point of aggregation, what kind of processing we need at that point, what kind of data in real time or near real time or later burst modes. How do we transmit this through LANs and WANs to actually the cloud where we can do further processing? How do we handle emergencies or notifications in terms of emergencies that we need to handle right away? That's a super important area as well. All right. So, I mean, again, this seems like an exhaustive list, but what are the top areas where we are seeing and which will create a massive disruption in the world? There's no surprise here again, as we talked earlier, industrial manufacturing. Everybody is trying to make major investments here to improve the process, to eliminate human error, to create operational efficiencies, and they're building smarter and smarter systems where to reduce the time of production and thus reducing the costs and whatnot. So that's one of the major areas. Utilities and smart cities, that's another area which is massive. I don't think small players can actually, startups can get into it unless it's like small applications that they're developing. One thing I like to cite here is an example of China. China is so much ahead sometimes in these terms of technology. I was with Kai-Fu Lee just a couple of weeks back, and he was citing this. That in China, when they talk about smart cities, they allow different ways and different approaches in different cities. In fact, when new cities are coming up or they're building new cities, they can start from ground up. They've started with implementing, incorporating devices right at that stage because it's possible. If a city is established, it's kind of hard to start from scratch. So they take that from all the way from there to multiple different ways of implementing solutions for bigger cities to make them smarter cities. So they are very open, very free with that. They let cities do whatever they want. When it comes time, that they will figure out which approach is the most profitable, that works the best. And that's when they come in, and that's when they make more investments in that. That's where they promote that. And if necessary, and as necessary as we've seen, that's when they'll work on regulations. And that's what they will then spread it across the country. So that's a very smart strategy, I thought. Instead of trying to struggle with technologies, trying to create regulations on things that you don't know whether they'll succeed, it doesn't make sense. So here they'll actually at least get going, and then when it doesn't make sense, they'll come and implement all those regulations. Supply chain is a big thing. Every manufacturing, every company, every process, you need a robust supply chain. So just to give you an idea, Walmart, for instance, they sell so many things. There are chip manufacturers, there are component manufacturers that supply to manufacturers somewhere in China, Taiwan, even in the US. All the way from manufacturing to getting that stuff on the transportation, through to warehouses, to retail stores. So if there's any problem anywhere in the supply chain, from components to the retailers, they want to know. It always helps to know what the problem is and what the impact of that problem is to the end user, to the customer. So this is a major area of investments and innovation, if you will. Facility management. I mean, nobody knows so far how they were doing it, like a facility like UW. They have so many appliances, they have so many things, equipment. Nobody really knows the real structure. They will actually send people out to see what it is. I mean, today, in fact, there's still technology that works with twisted wires that are connected to actual controls on the walls next to the appliances and these HVAC systems as to what to do with it. So there's a lot of impact on investments in this area, and I will talk about one of the investments we have in this later. Automotive, transportation, we just talked about it. It's going to be massive. There are massive investments. But then again, we'll have to wait and see who is going to be the winner. If you recall, the automobile industry of the 1900s, when the first cars were actually being manufactured, or they were researching, building factories. I think there were about almost 100 companies, startups, if you will, in that time, that actually raised a bunch of money. And they were all trying to push to be that first mover to build cars. But we all know, right, only a handful of them succeeded. It's about a dozen or less. The rest of them all died. And I think that we might see that kind of an impact here as well, as there are lots of players. But the good thing today is partnerships. They're all trying to work together with different modules or different aspects, which will definitely assist, in my opinion. Transportation, again, if trucks are on the road, you want to know at any given time, where exactly the truck is, where the goods are, what the impact is going to be. In regulatory cases, like, it has to be certain temperatures, etc. You definitely want to know what's going on. If possible, you want to regulate that remotely. So that's another big area of investment. Agriculture, you cannot talk enough about this. Starting from your sensors nowadays that you put into the ground to check the pH levels and humidity and all that, and you combine it with real-time satellite data as to what is going on in the weather. And you combine it with historic data. So with this processing, you can possibly predict very closely as to what and how to control and regulate things. And accordingly, you can help the yield in farming and all. Retail, this is one area that we've all experienced. Amazon has just taken over the world, apparently. So it's changed as we knew, and it's going to change even further, right? The only thing I want to say here is Amazon Go. It's a phenomenal example of how technology is going to take over and change how we live and shop and do things. It's not just about the QR code or the RFID or the UPC or something. It's very intelligent, advanced technology. It uses cognitive recognition, computer vision, whatnot to make it happen. It's very interesting. Financial services. This is one of the key things as well, as we know. Major investments are happening here to prevent fraud and misuse. We see all kinds of smart devices here, ATMs, biometrics as being used. Security, cybersecurity is a huge thing pretty much everywhere, but even more so in the financial services. Lots of investments are happening there as well. We'll see even better solutions. Healthcare is yet another example. I think they are placed and poised the best. The kind of research, the kind of data crunching it needs. As I mentioned in my previous example, now with this compute power and this advent in devices and gadgets and chipsets and whatnot, it makes it the right time to be able to accelerate the kind of research they were doing. It will help them with custom solutions for patients and all. So lots of things, interesting things are happening there as well. Personal, again, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't take much. You want these gadgets, you have like 3 different gadgets on you, taking care of your blood pressure and this and that, take care of things. and smart homes. Again, I'll talk more about this when we get to that specific example use case I have. So what exactly is IoT? You know, people talk about this for years now. What is it? Is it a device? Is it, it's a connected device? Is it the hardware, the software, the data, the analytics? What exactly is it? You know, who impacts or what can impact? Who are the players? This is an interesting thing I thought, so I thought I'll bring up this slide. Anybody want to give a shot at what IoT is here? Okay, I'll share what I think. So, as I said, IoT is not just one technology, or it's not just one thing. It's a combination of things. And it's not just things, it's a combination of multiple aspects for businesses. For instance, it's a fusion of physical and digital. How do you take a person working on a factory floor? How do you take that data, instead of the control next to it, bring it to the cloud, process the data, and then do something very meaningful with it? Avoid calamities, avoid things before they break down. So that's one of the important things and very difficult things today. The merging of information technology and operational technology. Similar to that, we have these fancy machines for years now. Again, very closely limited scope of control. How do we do a better job? So unless we can build a bridge and fuse these things, the cloud and the processing of data versus getting the data from the source up to that point, it's going to be super important. That's what IoT is all about. It's a medley of sensors, devices, business processes, market needs, technology, user experience. It's a complete solution. Starts off from the chipset. In many cases, the chips are so small you can put it any kind of gadgets, and we've seen that, right? In our personal solutions, we have these watches and whatnot. We have smart purses and all. Small little thing goes in, and it takes a lot of data, shares a lot of data. But that's just the beginning. Unless you really know the business process, what you're trying to solve, it becomes difficult. So that should be part of the whole solution. Market needs, we can get excited and carried away and build something, but does the market really need that? That's an important point to keep in mind. And then, of course, technology, and especially with the Gen Z or Y or whatever letter we are at, user experience is super important. Our generation, we trust the keyboard, which is so unnatural to use. But we got used to it and we adapted to it. But not anymore. We are going back to natural ways of communicating, creating that input and output kind of an experience. So that becomes very important. And then it's a collaboration between stakeholders, users, customers, developers, and partners. So you can imagine, when you're trying to build a solution, it's not just one party or one person or one company that will be able to do it. You'll have to work in unison with multiple players. Possibly, the chipset from Samsung or GE and their devices and whatnot. And we can use the platforms, and we can use applications which need developers and partners to kind of, again, work collaboratively across multiple solutions, multiple technologies, to create a complete solution. So to me, this is more of IoT. How do we get started? So obviously, unless you know the destination, it's hard to get there. Now you can try, but it just takes that much longer. So it's very important for a business to know what their goal is. This industry today, this technology today, especially IoT, is very use case based. It's hard to build highly accurate solutions that would work across the board. So it's very important for companies, customers to know what they're trying to build and why. Are they looking at increasing efficiencies? Are they looking at increasing productivity, profitability? What exactly is it they're trying to? Because the solution they develop will be very focused on that use case. And there are multiple different approaches. For example, if we look at healthcare again, if I am building a solution for a hospital, the workflows are very different in a hospital versus an outpatient care versus a small doctor's office. So it is super important to know the actual workflows and processes at each and every location. It's very important to know that, I think. The new business opportunities, are we trying to create a bigger market, new business? What does it really take? It's kind of important to know that as well, what the goal is. Competitive advantage, compliance and regulations. This is a huge thing now, as we all know, right? Starting with HIPAA for healthcare and GDPR, creating a lot of requirements, policy management and all. Again, it has to be somewhere in the process of between devices and end results, or it's data storage mostly. I'll talk about that with one of our use cases that we have. Cost and ROI. I think this is very difficult. Nobody can really predict what it will take to actually take your on-prem solution to the cloud. What are the actual costs of implementing all the sensors, the devices people keep talking about? And then once you are there, how much is it going to cost? Nobody really knows that. A good example is at one of the Gartner conferences I was talking with the CIO from LAPD. And we started talking and says, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for us. We had nothing, and all of a sudden, we have body cams for all our officers. And they are capturing data so much at each and every second. And we keep on uploading, and we keep on storing. The hope is that we would need it if something happens, but most of the data, 99% of the data, we don't even need. But we have to capture in case that 1% or less, 0.1%, we have to go back. How much would it cost me to store all these mega and petabytes of data? How much do I really need to store for how long? And once I make this investment, is there an ROI? What can I expect? What is the ongoing expense going to be for me to do this? And then as we keep saying, it's all about the data. Good data, better analysis, perfect intelligence that we can get to improve business processes and all. It's very important. All right, so it's a very basic level. What exactly does an IoT solution look like? It's a similarity with computers, right? We all knew input, CPU, output. So this is kind of a very simple block diagram that I created that will give you an idea of what it is. It all starts with ingestion of data, data collection, hub and gateways, how they help in edge processing at the ingestion stage. So as we keep talking about these chipsets, devices, sensors, there's so many of them. That is the starting point. So you have these in modern appliances, install them in equipment. That's the first step. This is done through some sort of a gateway, right? So not every corporation or enterprise already has this in place. So companies come and install a little gateway, which will help aggregate the data and push it to wherever you want on the servers, on-prem servers, or the cloud, or whatever it may be. And in the case of Edge, as we talked, what do we do with this data? Should we just send it across to the cloud? How much should we send it? What's the cost of doing that? So that's one of the things we have to worry about. The next step is the processing. So this is where you actually, even before you start doing anything, you need to create a schema, models as to what you are trying to process. all these cases we saw earlier, like what are we trying to solve here? That's an important stage, and data curation and classification is the key to data. And there's so much of data, some of it is unstructured. Structured is slightly easier to manage. But how do we, based on the context, actually curate? There are duplication of data. There's some data that we don't even know what it is. What do we do with it? And then how do we classify it so that we know exactly before we start processing and analyzing that data? At the end is the visualization. All you do is for the right person to look at. This depends on who is looking at, who it is meant for. It could range from the technician on the floor who has to go and fix a furnace or an AC, versus all the way up to the CEO who is trying to figure out what my investments are, how much I'm spending, how these things are working, what location, etc., where the problems are, how we can fix it. There's a lot of statistical and predictive analytics that can happen in the processing stage, and it can really help make these decisions and improve your processes. So now I'll walk you through some of the use cases of companies that I'm actually working with right now, our portfolio companies. First one is a local company called Optio3. It's a facility management. They have software for that. So they've actually developed a device discovery platform. What does that mean? In any given network, you have certain number of devices. Something else comes up, you have no idea what it is. Is it a rogue device? You want to know. Or something goes down, it's dead, you want to know how to fix it. So it helps with that. And once we've discovered the device, we keep track of all the capabilities of the device. What this device is, it's a one-way, a dumb sensor versus a smart sensor, etc. Can we control it remotely? Can we monitor it, and what can we do with it? So we store all that data. And then we process it, analyze it, and then again, we talked about in the previous slide, we create the reports, a dashboard, if you will, again, for multiple layers, from CIOs, managers, etc. So they can figure out and get things fixed immediately. So a good example is, I won't name names here, but one of our biggest customers is a facility management company in Seattle. And they actually go and bid for management contracts with big corporations. Today they just send a person, and the person walks around the whole thing, tries to aggregate, get a sense of what kind of devices, what they're going to be taking care of. It's such a hard process. And then they come and make an estimate, and then they have to live with it because these are long-term contracts. So you come in, Optio3, they just install this little gateway. It'll go detect everything in the facility, what kind of devices, what they're talking about, HVAC systems, carbon monoxide equipment, whatever it is. So they have an idea of, okay, instead of 5, there are 55, or 500, or 5,000. It helps them plan better. And then that's just the beginning. Once they install the solution is when they actually get in and do the discovery, monitoring, and management. So in some cases, we can even go and update the firmwares if required, although we don't do that, but we can. We can actually escalate or estimate lifetimes of devices and equipment and all. Hey, look, this device is going to die. You might want to do something about it right now before it dies and creates a major problem. So it's a very interesting company, I thought. The next one I'd like to mention is the D4DT solution. It actually tries to address the digital migration issue, especially for supply chain management. They also work at the edge, but the key thing about this company is a tall claim that they make. As we talked, data is so important. And there are companies here in the world that actually just focus on data. Once I get the data, I'm going to purify, classify, all that. There are companies that do that, yet D4DT claims that they have built intelligence, that within 48 hours they can onboard customers with data. So they actually work, this intelligence actually goes through, curates and classifies it automatically. And yes, it may take a little bit more work later, but at least they can onboard customers and they can start processing. So supply chain, they actually work with one of the largest motorcycle manufacturers in the world in India, which is Hero Honda. So they've actually built in sensors on their motorcycles, in about 8 or 10, whatever it is. The idea is to collect this data and not really broadcast it real time, but get this data and create some sort of reports for various stakeholders, right? Starting from a user, I want to know, what is the health of my motorcycle, what kind of mileage I get, etc. The next level, it helps parts manufacturers. Okay, this particular part breaks more often than not. This is a problematic part, so maybe we should manufacture more than the others. It helps the retailers and warehouses. So that once the parts are manufactured, they know, okay, this is the one that breaks more often. So this is what I should stock in my store or in my warehouse. It will help me. And at the end, it also helps the manufacturers to be able to predict and build better motorcycles in the future. That, okay, this is not working, maybe we need to change the design right here. So that's the kind of solution, that's the power of that platform. The third is a very interesting company. It's right now it's a China-based company. They actually have this product they're shipping, profiting company, and they're trying to set up offices here in the US. So this is an interesting device. If you think of Alexa, Google Home, or the best thing is if you can think of, some of you might have Comcast, and they have this X1 remote that you can actually talk to, and it will do what you tell it to do, but it's restricted to the TV and through the set-top box. Imagine that and adding a user interface like a smartphone and the controls. And imagine now that not only controls your TV, but it actually controls all your appliances in your house. It actually controls pretty much devices, whatever you have, and it's actually a phone. You can have your Skype calls, you can have your even Comcast calls or whatever it is. It's capable, and if you put in a cellular chip, it can actually be your cell phone. It's mind-blowing. So with the kind of integration of technologies that I've been talking about, this is a classic example of Wi-Fi, cellular, and chips and everything. It comes together. There are multiple providers of technology, the manufacturer, and then they create this, and then they create partnerships with all these media and content providers, partnerships with hardware manufacturers. It's just amazing, what it takes to build something like this. It can actually control not only your HVAC systems, but let's say you have a standalone air conditioner or heater. So you can just tell it that, hey, reduce the temperature by such and such, and it will go and control that, because it converts voice commands into the frequencies that the device might understand. It's brilliant. Last but not the least, since the title included cloud, I thought I would talk about one of our cloud companies. CoreStack is another very interesting platform. At a very basic level, it's a cloud governance and management platform. There are multiple use cases. The key thing it does is, at any given time, even today it's even more important to know what the heck is running on your cloud, or what applications, what services are actually running, for how long, what the costs are, etc. So what it does, it takes a discovery, a catalog of all the services running at any given time. It keeps track of all these key parameters to help customers know what is going on, how long their services are running and all. So it can help them plan better, that okay, I can take this workload. Instead of running in the afternoon when it's not really needed, I can do it maybe in the evening when it costs less. Or if I have multiple licenses, if I'm on a hybrid cloud, should I run it on AWS where it is more cost effective versus Azure, right? So that's the kind of power it has. This platform today actually supports on-prem, bare metal, public clouds, private clouds, Kubernetes, Docker, serverless, each and every of these technology and platforms we support today. With one dashboard, you can control all your services running in all these different platforms, and you can do a lot more with that. The other thing it does is it really helps. We build intelligence that we already know what services are running for how long and all. So we can help you with consumption, utilization, and all that. So if we figure out that this should not be taking this long based on historic data we have, we'll tell you that maybe there's some inefficiencies here. Maybe you want to go and visit that and fix that. So that's the kind of intelligence we bring in. Compliance, it's one of the biggest things, again, as we said. So I'll share an example with you. One of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Europe are working with 3 big name partners. I won't name anything here, but so they gave them a charter that, okay, we need to incorporate this GDPR policies across our corporation, organization. For 3 months, these guys struggled and struggled and struggled. They couldn't even come up with anything workable. And these are the partners they had been working with for years. So Microsoft, we are actually a gold and co-style partners with Microsoft. So Microsoft then recommended CoreStack. They said, why don't you try these people out? So our platform, our people go in and just tell them that, okay, in simple words, what are you trying to do? What kind of policies do you have? Just write it in English. Within 3 days, not only did we come up with the solution, but we incorporated it on their network without having any knowledge about what it was. All we knew was it's an Azure platform, and this is what needs to be done. They were so impressed, within a month we got a $500,000 contract and a 5-year deal. But this is the power of that platform. It's future-proof. Because things are going to change. What we have today, what seems the latest and greatest, will be a thing of the past pretty soon, especially in technology. So we've made it very important as to be able to support future improvements, progress, etc. in the industry. So it's one of the most interesting companies. There should be an announcement next week. You should look for it. All right. So who are the key players in the market? Maybe we should go bottom to top, because that's how the solution works in IoT. So at the very bottom, as we talked about, there are chipsets, PLAs, gadgets, devices, hardware manufacturers. It all starts with them. Some of them are big names, which are good, but there are lots and lots and lots of small players with their own proprietary protocols, etc. It's kind of hard to support all of them, but if they adhere to the standards, there are about a dozen fixed protocols. If they work with them, it's a lot easier to work with these devices and talk with these devices. So some of the players are, General Electric, Siemens, Honeywell. Oh, I have Siemens twice. Maybe it's that big. I don't know. Right? Sony, Samsung, Cisco. From networking. Networking is another important element, right? You collected this data, and then if you have real-time applications, you want as minimal latency as possible. So location becomes important. Your switches, your network gear becomes that much more important. How much of latency it gets, even microseconds could be important. Again, without naming names, the 2 larger cloud providers were fighting with one of the states in the country to get this order. And real-time application was important. So they went to this one company and they completely refused to do anything, and they kind of were pushing that, okay, we cannot build a data center for you. You have to use what we have. Whereas the other company said, okay, no worries, we'll build a small data center for you. Guess who the state went with? So latency and real time is important. Solutions. These are the guys who actually help with solutions, to develop solutions for, this is between partnerships with major partners, right? Like Microsoft will love to partner with big time players like GE, Honeywell, and all. Cloud service providers, that's another important element as we talked. These are the few big names that we have. Then there are service providers, system integrators, like consulting companies, Slalom, Accenture, Evernad. As we said, this is a very use case based platform. It's important to understand and take each and every solution. So that's where they come in handy. They'll understand what you need and they'll build customized solutions for them. And then applications. There are smaller applications, like millions of them, literally. And that's where startups come in. They can do that. So such a complex, such a vast, such a deep, such a broad space. What are the challenges? Why are not everybody knows and understands the benefits, but why are not they jumping in right away? Some of the things we already talked about, but predominantly it's a use case based scenario which limits the broad adoption. So even companies that are developing solutions with IoT, it's kind of hard to really create a one size fits all kind of a solution. So some customization, a lot of customization sometimes in the beginning that you need in the understanding of the business processes that you're trying to solve and all that. So that has become one of the challenges. Security and privacy, one of the biggest challenges, and it's an ongoing threat. It just is like a cat and mouse chase, I think, between hackers and companies trying to build security. You might have heard of this, right? I think it was Target that one of their mechanics went and installed a camera and left generic credentials, login credentials, and somebody hacked in through that and took over the complete IT and control of the whole thing, and they kind of lost almost $500 million of business just trying to fix it. Simple things, right, like this, but becomes a real challenge. GDPR, in the California, they have another law just like GDPR for the US for user data and privacy and all. That's super important. That creates one of the challenges. Then we talked about IT/OT integration, which is not always, doesn't come out easy. It could be expensive depending on what you're trying to address. So that's one of the challenges. And again, staying on-prem, going to the cloud, what kind of processing you want to do on the edge versus what you want to send, for what kind of real-time notifications, etc. That's another challenge. We talked about the LAPD and all, so they are confused as to what to do. Scalability and performance, that's another issue. You need real-time, how quick turnaround, etc. How big you can get. Pricing and monetization. So even let's say you build this, even application developers and providers don't know really how to charge, right? Should it be the density of devices? Should it be the area of the devices where they are installed? How do we charge them? What should be the pricing model that actually helps make money at the end of the day? And all these brick and mortar old school guys, they're all used to fixed costs. When you talk about IoT processing, cloud, yes, there's a little fixed cost, but then there's a SaaS model, services, So that becomes a challenge as to, what would be the right price for them. That's one of the things, an ambiguous ROI. You don't know. You invested these millions of dollars, how quickly you can get to your return of investments. So in conclusion, this is pretty much what I talked about. And now we're doing on time. Oh, so we are already there. So I'm not going to read through this. It's basically a summary of everything, going from opportunities and all that. One thing is, this is interesting. Humans are trying to be more like robots, and robots are trying to be more like humans. But the robot is actually saying, "Hey, no, I'd rather not be like you. I'm fine the way it is." This is the trend we are seeing. And thank you for your time. If there are any quick questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I'm CEO of Zcommerce automated cloud migration companies. What made you invest your money to CoreStack?
Could you repeat one more?
What made you
Invest
your
in
money
CoreStack.
CoreStack?
So the question is, what made us invest in CoreStack? That's a very good question. When first CoreStack came to us, they had this real good value proposition, but their messaging wasn't right. So early investors, they went to, it was kind of tricky. They said it's just a governance platform. There are like literally hundreds of them. What is different? Why are you doing it? So we took I actually took the time, I spent some time going through, doing some research on my own, asking a lot of questions, and what exactly does your platform do, what it's capable of. Many a times we don't have that luxury of time, so we just let go of these investments. But I guess I found the time, we talked, the guy was very open, the CEO of the company. Excellent team, thoroughly technology background, all these players from Microsoft, and they had worked on Azure. So once we figured out what the platform was really capable of, the future proof that it was. In short, that was the key thing. And they've actually proven at each and every stage, the openness, focus yet openness of the founders. The platform, it is so interesting, so broad, so wide, so deep. Hard to replicate something like this because, I didn't mention one of the use cases then that we help migrate to the public cloud. We know it's like a multi-billion-dollar business. So at a click of a button, they actually automatically generate a bunch of code, which would take 3 months to 6 months to a year for corporations to actually have all the people and all. But we deconstruct, reconstruct on the other side using open source through so that some of the use cases are very powerful. The other use case was with online providers. Especially for complicated online courses where somebody has to provision and deprovision environments for each and every student. If you take a university that has about 10,000 students, the IT becomes a bottleneck. It's not an IT company, but then that slows things down. So here, they've actually automated the platform where at a click of a button, it'll go in provision when the student registers, and then deprovisions when the student is done. So there are multiple reasons, but we can talk later.
What do you think about the cryptocurrency and blockchain in general? And do you think it's worth investing in it?
The question was about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and whether it's worth investing in it. This is another interesting question. To me, I separate the two, the blockchain platform and the cryptocurrency. And investing have not been, you have to be a lion-hearted person to make investments, but bring in cryptocurrency and you need 100 times more, I think. Blockchain platform has a lot of promise. There was a serious, real purpose. I won't get into what blockchain is here. And I see evolution of that technology, that platform. And it'll be adopted in multiple use cases. I can think of healthcare, government, etc., financial, fintech, supply chain. Anywhere where trackability is important. And being able to sustain original documents and records that cannot be changed. Super important. Cryptocurrency to me is more of a gamble. I'd rather go to Vegas than invest in a cryptocurrency company. That's my personal opinion. And mind you, everything I've said here is my personal opinions, so please. I think in the interest of time, maybe we should wrap it up. Thank you all for being here and giving me this opportunity.